Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum.
Padmaloka, in the heart of the Norfolk countryside, a place for men to retreat from the world as they prepare for ordination into the Western Buddhist order. All are given a new name. All dedicate themselves to the spiritual life. Their aim is the radical transformation of the self and of society. They call it going for refuge. Ironically, as Buddhism is declining in some of the eastern countries where it first found expression, it's now one of Britain's fastest growing spiritual movements, with many of its schools taking root here. One of the most controversial of these is the Friends of the Western Buddhist Order, or FWBO, based in Norfolk. It was founded by Englishman Dennis Lingwood, known as Sangharakshita to his followers. After years spent as a wandering monk in India, he established a movement here, hoping to make Buddhism more accessible to Westerners by sweeping away some of its Eastern practices. With an increasing throng of followers worldwide, the FWBO is a success. But that is not the whole story. There's a Buddhist saying, if you cannot speak good, say nothing. But critics from orthodox schools feel so strongly that Lingwood's teachings break Buddhist rules of sexual conduct and undermine family life that for the first time they've agreed to speak out. So too has a former member of the movement.
But 7 years after leaving the FWBO, I still feel angry and bitter, and I've sort of more or less given up any hope of having a normal sexual relationship again.
Buddhists do not believe in a god. Followers of the spiritual path meditate towards enlightenment, the realization of the ultimate truth of existence and compassion for all beings.
A lot of people come to the FWBO at least because they want to learn meditation. I think this is one of the great selling points, if I can use that expression, of Buddhism in the West. It teaches meditation, which offers mental peace and happiness and the possibility of individual spiritual development.
This meditation has been worked out over many centuries as a progressive way of helping us stay with the breathing.
Students of meditation are taught to clear their minds of erratic everyday thoughts, helping them relax and think more clearly. This can have a very calming influence.
When I sit in meditation, I'm constantly amazed by how busy my mind is. I mean, it's all over the place. I can sit there and focus on my breath for a bit, and then the sound of the milk lorry will filter through into my consciousness, and then I'll start feeling irritated because the sound of the birds is nice, but the sound of the milk lorry is irritating, and then I might start having fantasies about, because I should shoot the milkman, maybe I can unleash the dog so he scares them, you know, all that kind of ridiculous stuff. How can I be more conscious in the future that I can just sit there and say, oh, that's the sound of the milk bottles? Or even I can just sit there and say, those milk bottles are irritating you. That's interesting.
Oh, meditation is, it really has to be experienced to be valued. And if you get an external view of it, you could think, how can that be the kind of value that people claim? And it's really startling how that when I first started doing it, I was going through a fairly tricky time in my life, and it was something that I really felt I could cling on to.
Meditation is certainly cranky. That's for sure. Buddhism is for normal, healthy people, to make them more healthy and less normal.
So, as an example, I brought along this apple. And we all know what an apple looks like. If I drew that, you'd all know that was an apple. But would you actually recognise this apple, this particular apple, if you saw it again? Or would it just get lost? in piles of other golden deliciouses.
Students are encouraged to be more aware of their surroundings, as well as the workings of their minds. For Sangharakshita, this is the essence of Buddhism.
Ourselves.
I see it in terms of a very definite transition from what we regard as a mundane way of seeing the world and experiencing the world to what we would describe as a transcendental way, seeing it in terms of wisdom, seeing it in terms of real knowledge, seeing it in terms of ultimate reality, seeing it in terms of a truer, wider perspective.
Padmaloka, once a genteel English residence in a remote part of the Norfolk Broads, is now a Buddhist retreat centre for men. Coming here is the next step for those seeking ordination into the movement. A new, larger shrine room is being built to cope with the growing numbers wanting to come here.
You know, meditating and adopting Buddhist ethics and actually trying to change my life was coming across the FWBO. So that
John Woodhouse is a school teacher. Full membership of the WBO could take him several years to achieve, during which time he'll spend long periods on retreat away from his family, meditating and studying Buddhist teaching.
But when I come, usually I'm tired. I'm, I suppose you might say, wound up. I'm a bit speedy, a bit anxious, and first of all, one relaxes in an environment like this. One unwinds a little. But then what happens to me is I get in touch with my energy, I suppose. I become invigorated, so that by the time I leave, I'm feeling better, I'm feeling more positive, feeling clearer, and I'm feeling more cheerful, more able to maintain a cheerful demeanour and personality.
You're trying to create the best conditions in which people can study and practice, practice meditation, spend time reflecting and so on. So that's why we have it. It's a place where the conditions are at their best for spiritual practice.
John won't gain membership of the order by passing an exam. His teacher, or spiritual friend, will decide when he's ready.
In the last analysis, I think what it's about is, your own going for refuge, your own commitment, actually being able to recognise that in the other person. And you have a very strong sense, yes, that person is definitely on my wavelength. Not only is he, doing all the right things, as a Buddhist, but they actually have a definite sort of understanding and feeling, not understanding in the intellectual sense, but more in a intuitive sense. There is a definite sense that we're in tune here.
Buddhist practice has made my life better, and I want that to continue and to become more effective. It means that I can participate in the WBO as a full member, and that means a lot to me, that I should be a participant, I should be doing something to spread the Dharma, which I believe in.
Helping to finance the spread of the Dharma, or Buddhist teaching, and to fund charities in India is the WBO's business enterprise. Windhorse Trading in Cambridge is the centre of a flourishing import and retail business that, with an annual turnover of nearly £3 million, is one of Britain's fastest growing private companies. This is Buddhist business, and everything from the products sold to the working conditions and trading methods must be ethically sound.
As Buddhists, one of the underlying principles of Buddhism is non-harm, non-exploitation. So we wouldn't have anything to do with animal trade, which you get offered quite a lot in places where, from leather products through to even to shell, we wouldn't do. The application of something affects the ethics of it. So some software for a computer company is ethically neutral. The way in which the person works on that could be neutral, but it could be used, the end product could be used for a weapons system. So obviously you're dealing with a very complex situation trading in the world. You just have to come from your own values and do the best that you can. We don't pay ourselves a wage or a salary as such. The way that we structure our pay is in terms of support. The principle is you give what you can, take what you need.
And working for Windhorse provides everything a good Buddhist needs. Each employee receives enough pay to meet household bills, £25 a week spending money, and 6 weeks paid retreat a year. Buddhist ideals also affect working relationships. Even office gossip is strongly discouraged.
You don't, because that goes against the spirit, goes against the precepts, the ethical principles of Buddhism. So if people are engaging in that, engaging in backbiting, somebody would have a friendly word with them and say, you know, hang on, what you up to there? You know, somebody would point it out to them in a friendly way.
But perhaps most striking is the strict segregation of the sexes. Women work only at the shop, men only at the depot.
The thinking behind that is basically in terms of friendship, the development of friendship. It seems from our experience to be much easier to deepen communication with people of your own sex if members of the other opposite sex aren't around.
That's the other one. I'll see 3.
Nick, Mum's on the phone. Yeah? Okay, I'll phone her back later.
It's just as well the employees of Windhorse are friends. Many of them live together in one of the Order's single-sex communities.
The development of friendship, deepening communication is an important part. We don't make the split between community and our working situation. They're very integrated together.
A lot of people feel very isolated, very alone, and they're quite desperate for some kind of deeper human communication. And they make the point that they find the FWBO a very, very friendly body, and they find within it a welcome and friendship such as they hadn't experienced before in their lives.
In pursuit of deeper friendships, single-sex communities are being established all over the country. At Arunachala in Norwich, every day begins with meditation and devotion. Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya, Namo Nama, Om Ahom.
I think it's made a huge difference to me since we actually moved in together, because, you know, you can get to know each other, you know, first thing in the morning. And that, you know, I feel that's where real change can happen, because there's nothing hidden. You haven't got this sort of private part that nobody knows about.
I had no plans to move into a community at all. In fact, I didn't even like the idea of living in communities. I thought they made you get out of bed in the morning and things. But it's been attracted to certain people.
As well as ever-deepening friendship, the women share an intense admiration for Sangharakshita.
I find that amazing that, you know, I just do get this sense of tremendous wisdom and incredible kindness whenever I hear of anybody having met with them, or postcards he sends out and things. There's just an incredibly kind appreciation of all hundreds of people. His capacity is quite extraordinary.
The women firmly believe this way of life has advantages over conventional marriage.
The difficulty within the nuclear family is that it is exclusive, and it's 2 people, and that can very often be very neurotic. Whereas if you spread your attachments out over more people, then there's less likelihood of that to happen, I think. Maybe in a way that a wife may support a husband to do things, we want to support each other to fulfill their potential. We're not relying on men for anything.
Community life doesn't preclude sexual relationships, but their importance is played down by Sangharakshita. In the Order's magazine, he advises followers of the spiritual path.
You should be very careful not to spend too much time with the person you're having a sexual relationship with, and preferably not live with them.
In the West, an unhealthy emphasis has been placed on the sexual relationship to the neglect of other relationships. So I feel we need a greater spread of relationships. We need to attach more importance to our relationships with our parents, more importance to our relationships with the people we work with or work for, and more importance to our relationships with our friends. Not put all our eggs in this one romantic basket, as it were, with very often, disastrous results.
But this can have extra complications for families. David and Daphne Luce, or Sadaloka and Padmavati, are happily married. They have 3 children, but Sadaloka lives apart from them in a men's community.
We both realised we needed to rediscover ourselves. But on the other hand, we did obviously feel a very strong commitment to our children and giving them a family life. So I started to spend some time in the men's community. And we began to go on retreats separately and just begin to rediscover who we were apart from each other. I still see quite a lot of them, well, whenever I can. Sometimes she goes off on retreat for a couple of weeks and I go down and look after the house for that time.
Sadaloka doesn't agree that Padmavati has been left with all the responsibility.
I don't really think that's really a sort of a fair way of looking at it. I mean, there's not many women who manage to get away on retreat for maybe 3 or 4 weeks in a year, which she has been managing to do in more recent years as the children have got older. That, yes, the lifestyle we have is disadvantages. I'm not always there, and when children are ill or a bit difficult,
But critics have found Sangarakshita's writings hostile to the family.
If you set up communities, you abolish the family at a stroke. The single-sex community is probably our most powerful means of assault on the existing social setup. If you had a wife and 1 or 2 children, with luck, you'd get in a short meditation. If the wife didn't want you to do something, it doesn't really bear thinking about.
They've certainly found it anti-family. The nuclear family especially has its limitations because we do find that quite a few people who come into the FWBO have problems with their families. And you're well aware that, in recent years, a lot of cases, hitherto unsuspected cases of child sexual abuse have come to light. And this does seem to be, to some extent, a feature of the nuclear family.
For male WBO followers, there's also a warning about children from Subhuti, a member of the ordination team.
For a woman, having children may represent a healthy expression of her biological nature, but for any man whose principal interests lie elsewhere, it's likely to ensnare him in the lower evolution.
I distinguish between what I call the lower evolution, which is concerned with biology, with psychology in the ordinary sense, and the higher evolution, which is concerned with spiritual development. So if one is over-concerned with material prosperity, with family, with money, with fame, then all this pertains much more to the lower evolution and will inhibit one's pursuit of the higher evolution or the purely spiritual path.
Not all Buddhist orders share this view. Most adhere to the traditional Buddhist structure. Lay followers stay with their families. Ordained monks remain celibate and reside in monasteries. Reverend Master Daishin is head of one of the main Zen Buddhist schools in Britain.
In our tradition, when you have wife and children, for instance, you're a man who wishes to enter and become a monk, we would say that where your training lies is in fulfilling the commitments you've already made to your wife and children. But if you go back on that commitment, then indeed you're going to find the training very difficult, because you're not fulfilling the promises you've already made. You're not being true to the commitments that you've already given.
But the idea that critics have found hardest to swallow is Subhuti's interpretation of the Buddhist concept of Kalyana Mitrata, spiritual friendship between teachers and their pupils, or mitras.
Sexual interest on the part of a mail order member for a male mitra can create a connection which may allow Kalyana Mitrata to develop.
The writer continues after that remark, some are predisposed to this attraction. Others, he says, others have deliberately chosen to change their sexual preferences in order to use sex as a medium of Kalyana Mitrata. And then the best bit of all, to stay clear of the dangers of male-female relationships without giving up sex. Well, I think if it wasn't so serious, this would all be pretty hilarious, but in fact it is something I think quite serious.
To me, this is totally contrary to the Buddhist precepts. It's totally contrary to the Buddhist scriptures, and it's absolutely contrary to any sort of good practice. It to me is a form of manipulation.
If one doesn't mix, let us say, a sexual relationship with a spiritual relationship, there are difficulties to be encountered, and perhaps they're best avoided. But I wouldn't like to say that under no circumstances whatever can any such relationship ever be useful. I would not like to lay down the law as absolutely as that.
Having said that about staying clear of the dangers of male-female relationships without giving up sex, he goes on, many people do not feel able to do this, whether as a result of taboo or reluctance to give up a conditioned predisposition, which I suppose means that anyone who is heterosexual is only that way because he's been conditioned to it, which seems a little bit odd to my way of thinking.
Human beings are conditioned. Yeah, heterosexuality is a conditioning. Homosexuality is a conditioning. Bisexuality is a conditioning. Ultimately, you get beyond all conditioning when you're enlightened, but that means you've a long way to go.
Not everyone agrees with this. Peter was an ordained member of the WBO. Now he wishes he had never been involved with them. His name has been changed to protect his identity.
Well, I encountered in the FWBO the idea that your sort of sexual nature, or your whole nature, in fact, is a matter of conditioning. And in particular, that I ought to break down my conditioning and overcome my fear of homosexuality. And I couldn't succeed in becoming homosexual. I did try quite hard.
We don't say you should be heterosexual, you should be homosexual, you should leave your wife, or you should have a wife, or you should have a husband, or you should have children, or should not. It's for you to decide in accordance with your particular position and the strength of your desire to practice the Dharma in the way that is best suited to you.
Nobody actually told me in so many words, but there was a pressure to overcome one's dependence on the opposite sex. But I was spending all my time with other people in the FWBO and was very much influenced by the way they thought and spoke and what they did. And so I did trust them more than I trusted my own feelings, and I knew it was making me unhappy, obviously. But I thought this was because of my own weakness and lack of sort of resolve and spiritual commitment.
Psychologist Roger Barnes believes meditation techniques can have negative as well as positive effects on certain people.
I feel I've worked with an unacceptable level of people that have run into difficulties with this technique from various organizations, including the WBO. The people that I've seen from these organizations have been suffering from negative emotions displayed emotions that appear to be getting out of control, and also erring towards clinical depression. Meditation is a form of programming the mind, and if a person is encouraged or requested to address something that is definitely not his way or her way of thinking, such as being homosexual, then this can lead quite clearly to some trouble being created within their mind, within the confines of heterosexuality, homosexuality. It can leave a person completely in the middle of what they really feel are the true values of their sexuality themselves.
In retrospect, I just don't believe now that it is a matter of conditioning or not psychological conditioning as to whether one's homosexual or heterosexual. I mean, I'm quite sure that I'm not homosexual, but I still feel a good deal of guilt about this.
I would say that well, there are some people who don't find the FWBO to their liking and who may not have benefited from certain relationships within the FWBO. They may not have benefited, say, from meditations within the FWBO. Maybe some other kinds of meditation would suit them better. So if anybody comes into contact, with the FWBO and for any reason has a negative experience of that, obviously we're very sorry for that. But that does happen in some cases, a few cases.
In our materialistic culture, man's search for new forms of spirituality which can address the needs of our time seems endless. As the religious map of Britain becomes increasingly diverse, Buddhism looks set to play a significant role. The Western Buddhist order has challenged both Buddhist and British conventions. In the future, they want more than just to carve a niche for themselves in the existing society.